Hey everyone, hope everyone's hanging in there. Thanks for joining us. This is our second episode of Biz Talk with APA, and we're talking again about all the CARES Act programs. Everybody, hoping you're being patient and hanging in there and doing your best to navigate all this information and trying to figure out which program is the best for you. We're here again talking with Out of the Box Productions to help us give us some more clarity. Let's see here. Some things that are keeping me hopeful are last week, a number of business owners with employees, not necessarily sole proprietors and independent contractors. I've been seeing that they've actually either been approved or received money as a result of the Paycheck Protection Program. And I saw one figure of 700,000 loans have been actually approved. So as much as us as sole proprietors, independent contractors still haven't actually gotten money, and if any of you out there actually have gotten money, I'd love to hear from you. But I actually haven't heard from anyone yet. But I'm hoping this week. I actually myself applied last Tuesday and still actually haven't heard anything back from Chase. But anyways, hoping something happens this week. In terms of the PUA, we may touch a little bit more on this, but if you're wanting unemployment assistance, as of now, we can't, as independent contractors, sole proprietors, are not able to apply for that yet. And I'm sure a lot of you are probably wondering, you might have gotten denied, or you're wondering why it's not coming through. They're still trying to figure it all out. Let's see here.
Yeah, so we've been following a number of these different webinars that we're hearing, and we're trying to share when we hear about webinars that are happening, posting them on apanational.org's website. Any information we find, we try to post to try to share it with everybody, so we can collect as much information as possible and pass it along.
Right. And so let me just introduce our folks from OOTB, Out of the Box Productions. Out of the Box does payroll specialize in payroll and billing for the photography industry, commercial photography industry. We have Philip Chigos. He's the co-owner along with Mary Domenico. Mary's not on the call. Say hi, Philip.
Hello.
And Michael Walters, she's a senior account manager at OOTB. Thank you so much for being on the call today. So glad to have you here. And so yeah, let's.
I was gonna, if you don't mind, if I want to say that,
yeah.
Michael and I have been reading about all of these programs, and it's new to all of us. It's new to all of us in this country, and everything that everybody's experiencing is new for all of us. And so we wanted to offer what we have learned to date, and as we joke on a daily basis, things change on a daily basis.
Right.
So in this conversation, it's what we know as of today.
Yes.
And out of the box, we really are trying to just support our community with whatever we can, and in this case, it's information. So
yeah.
If anybody has any questions that aren't addressed in this webinar, they can feel free to reach out to us after the fact via the website.
And another way to explain it is that a lot of professionals, tax professionals, everybody has not been given a lot of guidance on a lot of these specifics that we all want answers to. And the only thing we can do is really share our own experience with it. And I think, if you know people who have actually gotten the loan, I would reach out to them to kind of see what they did. And especially with the Paycheck Protection Program, if you can reach out to your CPA to get some help, that is, I think, I mean, of course, they may not have answers either, but it's definitely a good thing, because each bank is different. Every application is going to be different. And as you'll see when we talk, some things may work with one bank and some may not with others.
Speaking of which, we have good news to share. I got an email an hour ago. Out of the Box Productions was approved for the PPP.
Oh my gosh, really?
Bank of San Francisco.
Congrats. Wow. I mean, that's great news.
Yeah, it was funny. You know, our contact had used some language, which to me it wasn't very clear as to whether or not we had it. And I replied back and said, "Does that mean we have we're approved?" And she said, essentially, yes. Everybody, literally, the language isn't even. They don't know how to tell you that you are approved, because you're not approved, because it's not guaranteed. It's I don't recall what the terminology was, but essentially she said, you're authorized. I said, authorized sounds positive, but does that? So everything is new for everyone here.
Well, that's funny, because I was thinking of trying to contact someone that got approved to be on here, and well, here we have it. I mean,
you did it.
Well, so I guess let me ask you: have they gotten in touch saying, trying to clarify any questions or any things that they weren't clear on with you?
Yes, I submitted last Monday, and then on Saturday they followed up with follow-up questions and to clarify some of the accounting and things like that, because essentially these people are doing underwriting as they go. They, one hand, are reading what the underwriting guidelines are, and on the other hand, implementing it on the fly. So, and then so today's Tuesday, so couple of days, and then we don't know when the funds will show up, but presumably within days.
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, everyone thought that if they applied for EDD, that was going to come through quicker, and I mean, it's
in particular the $10,000 grant was supposed to come through within 3 days.
Right, that as well, and that's a whole nother story from what I'm sure a lot of us got these emails yesterday from the SBA saying that it's essentially for someone who's a sole proprietor or contractor, your one business, unless you have multiple employees, will be only given $1,000 and not $10,000 for this advance, right?
Correct.
Really understand.
Up to 10 employees, 1,000 each.
Got it.
And again, that nobody knows when that program, or if that program will ever be refunded by Congress. And from my understanding, is that there essentially are no funds there anymore. That was tapped out, and that program is designed for disaster zones. And as we all know, all 50 states are now technically disaster zones. So,
right. I actually am just seeing someone in the chat saying if someone was turned down for the 1K from EIDL because she's a sole proprietor with no employees. I don't know if she's saying, does that sound right? I'm not sure. I did hear someone else today, and I'm not sure what their business classification is, that actually got that $1,000. Have you heard anything else? I mean, as far as I know, you should be able to, sole proprietors should be eligible for that. I'm curious to hear more about that. Why that person got turned down.
I mean, with regards to that application and that program, the application takes minutes, 5-10 minutes, and there's no skin off anything to do that. And so there's no downside in applying. I just wouldn't hold my breath or have any expectations from that program.
One thing I have heard is if you applied for the EIDL before March 30th, to reapply for it. So get back on there and try again. Because I think there was something where you had to check a box for the advance grant.
There was.
Right.
There
Okay.
was a, yeah, but
Yeah. Okay. So let's jump into some questions. We have we had a lot of questions last week we couldn't get to, and so some of those might be addressed here. And everybody, we've just been flooded with questions, so bear with us. If it's a really important question, get in touch with us afterwards if we don't get to it. But just to kind of give you a sense, like a lot of the other webinars you may be seeing, they're pulling up slides and they're like going through every little detail of it. And we're trying to just kind of deep dive a little bit more into some of these more timely things going on. And right now it's, oh, well, by the way, I did this little poll that you all registered with, and the majority of people were actually still filling out and they still have not applied. A number of people have applied, have been able to successfully submit their application, but and some people still don't think that they're able to apply. And so, we're going to try to address, all of you as best as we can. For those of you who don't think you're able to apply, I just want to tell you, if you're a sole proprietor, you can apply. And one of the only things, I think, if your net income was too low, you may want to consider doing EDD instead. But if you had income that would qualify you for more than what you would get for EDD, you can apply. And don't get discouraged by it when you're seeing a lot of this language out there that sounds like it applies more to like small businesses that have a number of employees, because there's all these words called payroll, and that makes us think that it's not for us. But as long as you use your Schedule C, line 31, when you're applying, and that's what you use for your monthly payroll amount. Okay, so
just to clarify, you had mentioned the EDD. You're saying wait for the PUA program to come to be. Correct?
Right.
Because I think the presumption is that most of the people that are on this call come from the perspective of a sole proprietor, independent contractor who does not have W-2 wages to qualify them for unemployment insurance. Correct. And so therefore, that being the case, we have the PPP right now, which is viable and ready, and everyone should apply for. And down the road, when the EDD is able to get their program up and running for independent contractors, then people can apply for that.
Right. I mean, I guess that's a whole nother argument to get your PPP application in as soon as possible, especially since we're hearing that we can't actually be applying yet for this PUA, which is, if you're starting to get overwhelmed by all these acronyms, I am too, don't worry. But PUA and UI are basically, right now, in my head at least, synonymous. They're basically unemployment insurance and pandemic unemployment assistance, I believe it is. So, but yes, it's a good time, I think, to apply for PPP. So my main question moving forward, because it feels like a lot of people have been able to actually apply, but are wondering, what now? If I get approved, how am I going to actually receive this money, and what am I going to spend it on, and am I going to have to pay it back? And I actually spent a lot of time yesterday looking up this question, and I don't actually know, I mean, if there's really a good answer for it. It doesn't really seem like anyone can answer it, but basically, if you get a job, if someone asks you to shoot something, some products, for me, I'm a food photographer, and they send me some fish to shoot, and they pay me, is that going to affect the amount of money that I'm actually getting for this Paycheck Protection Program?
I'd be happy to answer that. And
Yeah.
the answer is no. You would, over the course of the time period of the PPP, compensate yourself up to 75% of the funds that you receive. And then, as we know, we have 25% going to other fixed costs. And that money would be paid to yourself as wages, as compensation to you. And whatever you're able to derive outside of that is your revenue unrelated to the PPP.
Okay, so the thing I was thinking of was, say you get approved for $20,000 for PPP, and all of a sudden you get this big advertising job, right? And you're getting paid, I don't know, I'm exaggerating. Well, I wish I wasn't exaggerating, but say you're getting paid $200,000-$300,000, just an exorbitant amount. You can still get PPP even though
once the funds once the loan is initiated and given to you, then those funds are yours.
Right.
You could essentially, right now there's not a lot of guidelines in terms of there's guidelines in terms of forgiveness, right, which everybody wants. But if you don't want forgiveness, then there's very little language as to how people should otherwise spend it. So technically, that $20,000 you received, you could take on as a loan at a very favorable rate and use it as you please, but it needs to be paid back in 2 years. So,
and I would add to, go ahead, Phil.
I was going to say, the notion is everybody wants to have it forgiven as you should, and so therefore we stick to these guidelines. But Michael?
And I would add the distinction too that the Paycheck Protection Program is designed to maintain your expenses for the next 10 weeks, right? So whatever you put on your application, they'll determine the amount, and you have to then ensure that you have those expenses and are going to pay out those expenses based on your previous business in order to maintain your business. And so as long as you continue to pay out the salaries or the expenses that were reported in your previous history in being in business, and continue to pay out those in the same manner throughout those next 10 weeks, that's the goal. There is confusion because with unemployment, yes, if you're receiving unemployment and you do get job or you do get work or you do get paid, that is going to affect your award amount because it's based on you not working. But the PPP is about maintaining work. It's not about you not receiving any work. You can still work and use those PPP funds to maintain the expenses in your business.
Got it. That's good clarification. Thanks. Someone just posted in the chat, New York State will permit freelance sole proprietor unemployment insurance benefits. I don't know. Do you all know anything about that? To me, I would assume that it's nationwide that the unemployment benefits we're still waiting to hear.
So the federal government created the mandate and put it to the states to create their own programs.
Okay. So are you saying, sorry, New York is already allowing freelancers to collect that PUA?
Presumably, I would not to apply for and receive those benefits.
Okay, well, thanks, Jonathan, for that. I mean, I would encourage you to look that up state by state, of course. In California, at least, we're still waiting. Okay, so well, I think that kind of helps clear that up. I just will reiterate here that sole proprietors think that this money through PPP can only be used for whether it's your studio rent or to pay employees and your utilities. However, the thing that I think people aren't understanding is that as a sole proprietor, you're essentially paying yourself, and that money that they're saying is for payroll is actually for you, and you can actually use it to pay your own personal rent and your food costs and all those, other costs that you're getting as if you were an employee. So if you think that you can't use it for personal expenses, get clear with someone and because you can. Okay, moving right along. Unless you want to add something on that, either of you, or it's pretty straightforward.
No, you said it straight as it is.
Okay.
It's wages. It's money that you are deriving
Mm-hmm.
as if, as you did in months past, but now it's coming through a loan program.
Right.
I would add to some of the best practices we've seen is whatever funds you receive, put it into a separate account or segregate it in an account so that you can show proof that what you used of that money was designed for wages, aka you're paying yourself, right? So once you do your application, you do your total line 31 of net profit, they divide it by 12 and then times by 2.5. Those are the wages associated with the loan amount that you're getting, and you want to spend 75% of that on wages. And so as you have that money in your account and you're paying yourself that salary or that wage amount, you want to show that proof, because after 60 days, you have to then show your lender what you've used that money for. And that's where that 75% comes in, to ensure that you don't have to pay the money back, right? It has to be forgivable. The forgivable piece has to be 75% of wages, because it's the Paycheck protection program. So the goal of the program is to protect wages based on how you've operated your business in the past. So you want to show as a sole proprietor or independent contractor that you're continuing to pay yourself in the way that you paid yourself previously, which qualified you for the loan.
Right. And I feel like, this whole experience, I'm sure we're, as photographers, all learning so much. I know I have, and, I'm curious. I'm so curious. I'm a sole proprietor, and I'm curious now. I maybe want to looking into S Corp, and I may be needing to be a little bit smarter with my books and how I, do things on that end. I know there are a lot of people out there that actually don't have business checking accounts, and now a lot of the banks are requiring you to have a business checking account in order for you to be able to apply for this. I don't think all of them are. I've heard of some people who were able to actually, well, one person said that they went into their bank, it was a local bank, and went in and said, "Hey, I'm going to take out my money if you don't help me, because the only reason is you're not working with me is because I have a personal checking account." And they immediately said, "So sorry, we'll help you." I was pretty shocked, but so.
I see somebody's asking a question regarding being set up as an S Corp, and that they are currently not paying themselves wages through that S Corp. And so our understanding is that you are not able to qualify for this loan as an S Corp that's not paying yourself wages, because that is a requirement of being an S Corp, and as a flow-through entity.
Sorry, so in other words, you're saying that, so they can't apply for it as an S Corp, but they can apply for it as a individual?
If they were an S Corp that had paid wages to themselves, assuming that they don't pay wages to anyone else through their S Corp. If they were an S Corp that did pay wages, our corporation, we're an LLC that has an S Corp status, but so that's how most S Corps are set up, as an LLC. However, we pay wages to ourselves as owners and as well as our employees. And so therefore we're able to qualify for this plan. But if you're not paying, Michael?
Just to read it off so that everyone, because we did find this this question, that it says businesses that are structured as C Corps or S Corps must use payroll to pay their owners because the corporation is taxed separately from the individual. If you own a corporation and have not been paying yourself a salary through payroll, you will not have a salary covered through the PPP. So you can still apply, it's just that those funds won't qualify you for additional funding through the PPP. This is because the distributions or dividends from a corporation are not considered to be a salary or a self-employed income. Payments made to contractors aren't considered payroll and aren't eligible under PPP. So because you've been taking it as dividends, if you haven't been payrolling yourself through your S or your C Corp, those monies are not eligible or are seen as wages or salary, and therefore not acceptable under the PPP to be paid. Does that clarify it a little bit more?
I mean, to be honest with you, I'm not an S Corp, so I don't, but I mean, I'm assuming a lot of we do have quite a few S Corp folks on here, and I'm hoping that they understood that. Let's go to my next question. And, you know, if you have more S Corp questions, you can, I mean, put in that question relating to what they said, or contact us after. I want to go to anybody who's still struggling. If your bank actually says they won't work with you, I want to make sure you know that you still have options. So let me go show you my slide here. Sorry, 1 second. I do have one slide to show you some of the options. So here we have two banks, US Bank and United Business Bank. I'm sure there are others. Those are the only ones I could find. You don't have to be a customer. I heard that US Bank actually just as of yesterday started to take non-customers. I'm not very familiar with United Business Bank, but I did receive I got this from the SBDC, which is it's basically the local Small Business Development Center. So that was their recommendation. These are non-bank lenders: Cabbage, Lendistry, Divvy, Fundera. There are numerous ones out there. The SBDC also recommended them. I can't speak to any of the credibility of them, but I'm taking the SBDC's word for it that you know they're credible. And also, I've just seen that Intuit, PayPal, and Square, as of just Friday, have all joined to be distributing the PPP. So and Intuit is actually the owner of QuickBooks, and so it's going to be available as a subset of QuickBooks Online payroll customers. So if you haven't gotten your application in, I would consider contacting some of these, and we can you know, screen grab this right now, or we can send it to you in a follow-up email.
Also point out the Fundera website has a very informative blog.
Mm-hmm.
So
Really?
as we've all been reading.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody who's on this call, we can send in, when the email confirmation goes out afterwards, who've been on this call, we can send all the slides to.
Good.
Okay. I see a question there about applying for unemployment and the PPP at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I would add about that is the purpose of the PPP loan is, again, to maintain your existing wages and salaries. So if you're on unemployment and you're approved for PPP, therefore you're using money from the state, you're getting money from unemployment, assumably you're not paying yourself. So it would then decrease the amount of money you're going to pay yourself through PPP, and then hence those loans, those monies would then not be forgivable. So it's not really advisable at this time to be on unemployment and if you're approved for PPP, because again, the purpose is to maintain the same amount of salaries through those 10 weeks. And if you are being funded by unemployment, you're making less money and therefore not able to pay that same amount. So a better potential course of action based on your business would be to hold off on, if you are approved for PPP, use those funds to pay yourself. And then after PPP is ended, you can then potentially apply for unemployment under the PUA option, or regular UI if you qualify for unemployment insurance benefits under the traditional plan. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I believe so. If that is the case in New York, where unemployment is possible for freelancers, then they may just want to, and that they're not eligible for PPP because, say, their income isn't high enough, their payroll, then they may just want to go straight to applying for unemployment. But that sounds like a good plan, especially in California and other states where unemployment still isn't up and running for us.
Well, and the trick to also, so that everyone has the most information, is that the additional $600 stipend through unemployment is only available through almost the same period of the PPP, right? So that will end in the end of July for the additional $600 stipend. So if you do have money, or you are able to get money from unemployment insurance, you want to weigh those benefits between getting the uninsurance award plus the $600 or the PPP funds based on, what you think you'll qualify for based on your average payments and, your business history. Mm-hmm. So you really have two options at this time, and you want, based on your business, weigh which one is going to be most beneficial for you.
Right. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, it's a unique person, though, that would qualify for both the PPP and unemployment insurance right now, because they would have to have been paying themselves as employees.
Right.
So presumably through an S Corp. Somebody had asked a question specific about being an S Corp and having paid themselves through a service like Chase Quick Pay and not through a payroll provider. And the mechanism of paying oneself isn't really the question. It's whether or not you've been paying the payroll taxes. So if you've been paying payroll taxes and you have to do it at least quarterly, then you presumably could qualify as an S Corp. But if you have not been paying quarterly payroll taxes, then that's the issue.
Oh, wow, really? That's good to know. Okay, so we do have a lot of questions. I mean, we want to answer them as thoroughly as possible. So we have about a half hour left. I just wanted to address one thing about if you have, some people like me, we haven't heard anything back from our banks, and we're people starting to get antsy. We want answers, and some people have actually put in multiple applications in with different banks for the Paycheck Protection Program, and I found out a few things. Do you know anything about that in terms of, is that okay to do? And
Michael, you've read on that recently, haven't you?
Yeah, I think the main concern with applying at multiple banks is fraud, and the fact that they are monitoring this process so carefully to ensure that people are not taking advantage of the system. And so potentially applying at multiple banks means that you're trying to get two loans at once and work the system. So, but I know that there are a lot of people who are frustrated because their initial bank they applied to are extremely unresponsive. My suggestion, based on what I've heard, and Nada, please pop in if you read anything different, is if you do apply at a second bank, you're completely open and honest with them to let them know that you have an existing application out, but you've been frustrated and have not heard anything. And take the guidance from the bank on what they say, document it, that that conversation was had, and based on what they say. The other thing they said is that if you do apply with the second bank and they provide an approval process before your first bank, make sure that you say, pause, let me remove my application from the first bank, and then pursue with the second bank, submitting it to the SBA. So you don't want them to submit it to the SBA while the other bank is also submitting to the SBA, because that will cause a fraud alert potentially and put you in a larger liability.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. I mean, that's essentially the same thing. I was going to say that a couple good resources that I've been following a lot as of Forbes and INC magazine have been doing lots of stories on the Paycheck Protection Program, and they just recently interviewed someone from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce who said basically what you said, that it could trigger a fraud alert. And they said to ask for a guarantee that the lenders will contact you before submitting your applications. So you do not want them to put both in, because that could trigger a fraud alert. But I guess the worry is that the banks would do it without consulting you, because obviously they're, with especially the bigger banks, they're not communicating. So just be something to be careful about. I've been tempted to put in a second application in with US Bank, but I was just kind of waiting, hoping I get something from Chase.
And there was a question about fees from the banks, whether or not they can charge fees or would charge fees.
Right. From the SBDC webinar I was on the other day, they said to check and make sure. From there, some of them may and some of them might not. They're supposed to be, most of them should be free, but I just would watch it.
My understanding is the banks are being compensated for funding these loans, and compensated very well. So there might be people who are trying to become third-party providers and helping bridge between the bank and the borrower. I would not recommend that to anybody, because the application process is very straightforward, and there's no value add. And my understanding was that it wasn't going to be allowed to have any third-party people in between the banks and the borrowers.
Right.
But,
yeah, I mean, I think, especially with
if there's an application fee, then you should walk away from that process, because that to me is more of a fraud alert than it is some sort of fee that's associated with the process.
Right. And I think from what I've heard is it's mainly the non-bank lenders like Fundera, Divvy, Lendistry, Cabbage that I showed you on the slide, to make sure with them that they're not charging you. A lot of the banks should definitely, absolutely should not be charging you, right? Let's see. Okay, so that's kind of the gist of my main questions I wanted to ask, and wanted to just kind of go through some of these questions start with some of these from last week. Let me pull those up. And I mean, ideally, I don't want to spend a ton of time on each. If we can kind of keep each answer to not, take too long on them. But so I basically broke them up into PPP, EIDL, and PUA. And we'll start first with PPP. Someone saying, I'm getting occasional assignments currently from my hospital client. I usually get paid net 30. So do I report the work on the dates that the work is happening, or when I have a check to deposit?
So for the PPP, they're looking at last year's revenue. So they're wanting to look at the Schedule C from 2019.
Right.
And so the notion is that if you have not filed your taxes for 2019, you ought to as soon as possible. And if you haven't, then you just need to essentially do the work that you would be putting forth for your tax returns in order to derive that line 31 on Schedule C, which tells you effectively your net income.
But what if they're getting unemployment money?
If they were back in 2019,
No, now, if they start to collect money from unemployment, is it when they did the job or when they're paid for the job that they would say that those were the days they worked?
so we're talking about somebody who's working as an employee right now.
No, they're a freelance photographer. They just got as an assignment from a hospital to photograph at the hospital. So, but they've applied for the unemployment. Let's say they start to get the unemployment money. Do they have to show the days worked as the days that they actually did the work, or the days when they actually get paid, then they say, oh, I've been paid for these jobs, so I don't get unemployment on that
Correct.
day.
If you're approved for unemployment and you're receiving a weekly unemployment award, every 2 weeks you have to recertify with the unemployment office how much income you've received. And there's an equation that you can look up on the EDD website, and essentially anything earned over 25% of your award will be deducted from your monthly payout. So if you are receiving income while on unemployment, it will deduct from your weekly or your biweekly payment. But that's unrelated to the PPP.
Sorry, yeah,
you are on unemployment and receiving unemployment payments.
And I guess the distinction I was confused by was the fact that we're talking about somebody who is receiving 1099 compensation in this project you're referring to now. However, they've qualified for unemployment insurance, obviously from having W-2 income in the past. So that was my confusion there. But as Michael responded, any income needs to be reported, regardless of 1099 or W-2.
Right. Sorry, that was a unemployment question. I've got
Welcome
hidden
all.
with all the PPP.
No.
Okay, next one. Like many other photographers, my business is a one-person LLC filing as an S Corp. I pay myself a monthly base wage and the rest of my income as shareholder distributions. Can I include the shareholder distribution as part of my payroll costs? I'm looking at the similar compensation description that's in the salary and wages line item. I think you might have talked about that a little bit. And I think we're going to probably be a little redundant, but some things we need to hear a number of times. So it's
okay. And again, we're not CPAs. Just, we want everybody to know you have to go through the right channels to get the final answer. But from our understanding, as Michael's been pointing out, it's the payroll protection plan. So what the intention of the program was, and it was created in a matter of days, was to ensure that the payroll checks continue in this country. And so in the situation where you have somebody who's an S Corp and they are paying themselves a salary and they are paying the appropriate payroll taxes associated to that salary, then that salary that they're paying themselves will qualify for the PPP and allow them to receive money through the PPP. But what the PPP is not designed to do is to take your net income as a business owner and extend that for 10 weeks. It's protect your payroll check for 10 weeks.
All right. Okay. Another question. I'm an S Corp, no employees, 2019 tax return not yet filed. Can I use 2018 Schedule C to apply for PPP to cover business expenses? Have you heard anything about them accepting 2018?
Nope, it's 2019.
Wow, okay. And I mean, I'm sure there may be banks that do it, but obviously you're going to have to check with your own specific bank. But most of banks so far, it sounds like they're not allowing 2000.
And the banks are using the SBA PPP application, the data that is being requested from the SBA.
Right.
And so really, when you go online and go to the SBA and request the PPP application, whatever is being asked there is what every bank will be required to ask of you. There are certain situations where people are being able to use data that's not just 12 months of 2019, and that's if they're a startup business and essentially they don't have the revenue for 12 months. Then they can look at a January, February of 2020 to gauge that. And or if they're a seasonal business, there's a 4-month range. I believe it's July through November, but it's a shorter time range in order to derive for a seasonal business. But again, for what most of the people we're talking to here today, it's going to be 12 months of 2019, and or if they have a justifiable reason for not having revenue for the entirety of the year, they can try to make the argument for January, February 2020.
Got it. Okay. So, I mean, we basically answered this question, but it comes up a lot, and I just want to ask it just so we can ask it. And I think we went over this, but can one apply for EIDL, PPP, and also unemployment? And basically, essentially, the answer is if you are getting unemployment, that may affect you can apply for everything, but if you're getting unemployment, it may affect what you get, or if you get anything for PPP. Anything else you want to add there?
So, and again, we just have to make sure it's very clear that if we're applying for, when we say EDD, unemployment insurance, we're assuming that people are referring to wages that they've earned, W-2 wages, over the past 5 quarters, right? And then when we talk about the PPP and sole proprietors, independent contractors applying for the PPP, then they are deriving a loan based upon revenue that they had in 2019 that was not compensated as as payroll, right? It was effectively that line 31 on Schedule C to give us, as a sole proprietor, independent contractor, what your wages were. So when we talk about the two things, they typically don't overlap. But if for the rare cases where they do overlap and somebody does qualify for unemployment insurance and they can apply for and receive funds through the PPP, then as Michael was pointing out earlier, when you're receiving the money through the PPP, if you are going to want that to be forgiven, you need to take up to 75% of that as wages. And when you take that money as wages, that needs to be reported every 2 weeks to the EDD. And so that will affect the benefit that you receive through unemployment.
Got it. Okay. Moving along, what is the difference between sole proprietor, independent contractor, and self-employed? Do you want to answer that? A lot of people have been asking it.
Yeah, so most of the time, so they have a lot of similarities, but sole proprietor is essentially somebody who's out doing business on their own for themselves. And typically, what the distinction is that you don't apply for an EIN, which is an employer identification number. And an employer identification number is required when you have employees. So if you are a sole proprietor only by yourself, then you use your Social Security number, is what identifies you as a business. LLCs can elect to use their Social Security number if they don't have employees. But once you have employees, you need to get an EIN. So an LLC can be recorded as either by your Social Security number or your EIN. And the notion of a sole proprietor is essentially the same thing. It's somebody who's working for themselves for their own intent
I mean,
and through the taxes. What's that?
so, well, the way I look at it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're a sole proprietor, you can also be self-employed and an independent contractor. But I always look at it as you can be an independent contractor can be a S corp or an LLC or a sole proprietor, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. It's how you're putting yourself out there to be engaged. Are you a wage earner, an employee, or are you a contractor?
Yeah, I mean, because you see a lot of the digital techs and stylists and different people in the industry who have some kind of LLC status, but I look at them as more of like an independent contractor, right?
Well, the question there, goes back to what also was in the news before the COVID-19 world we're in now, was the AB5, and that's a huge part of why Out of the Box came to be, was because of the need to identify people in the industry that are genuinely employees and need to be treated as employees, and those that are independent contractors, being that they're falling under the guidelines, and we're not going to go down that road.
I know. I was going to say the same thing.
Nope, not going to do it. But just to answer your question about the independent contractor, it's
Yeah.
how you put yourself out there, control mechanisms in the relationship between you and the party that's engaging you.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Someone is asking something about they haven't, their business has lost money with no payroll the last 2 years, but was tracking to make profits this year. Are you eligible for PPP?
When we say this year, are we talking 2020 or 2019? Again, if based on the information we have on the question, if they can make an argument to their bank as to why they should not be able to look at 2019, but only look at 2020 and January, February 2020, then I would say give it a shot. There's no reason not to.
That's definitely your that's my motto. Give it a shot with all this, because
yeah. What's the downside?
Right. Does PPP require having W-2 employees in order to be eligible? I think it's just, these are basic questions that people need to keep hearing them. You don't need to have W-2 employees in order to be eligible with PPP.
Now, look at your 2019, and just for reference, look at your 2018 tax return, Schedule C, and look at line 31. Right. And that'll tell you your net revenue, net revenue, and you can use that number to qualify for the PPP.
Got it. Okay, that's for the moment, at least, all I have for PPP, and I'm sure we have more questions that have come in, and that I want to, once we're done going through this set of questions about EIDL and PUA, if we still have time, I'd love to go through some more, but we do have 8 minutes left. Hopefully we can squeeze in a few more minutes. But EIDL, we can just go over that real quick. Like we said at the beginning, things have changed for it. We thought we were going to be eligible for up to $10,000 advance for it. And as of just a few days ago, I guess, if you are, say you're a sole proprietor with no employees, or even an S corp or LLC, you will only be eligible for $1,000 per employee, right? Or per business if you have no employees. Is that correct?
That's correct. 1,000 per employee, up to 10.
Right.
And again, I personally, I am not expecting anything from that program.
Yeah.
We have 5 companies, and we applied through all 5, and I will be shocked if we receive any funds through that program.
I know. I would focus all your energy on PPP. Right. I mean, sorry, I shouldn't be telling you what to do. That's what I'm doing right now. EIDL, yes, if you get it, great. If not, then it's a bummer, but it's not as big of a deal as PPP. Let's see, someone's asking about cost of goods sold on that application. I provide a service, do not sell goods, only provide photo services. Any guidance on that? I think I put $0 myself.
Zero.
Yeah, just put 0. Okay, let's move on to PUA. Any other things you want to add about EIDL? I think that's pretty straightforward.
The only thing I'd say about EIDL is it's an existing program that has always been around for disaster relief, right? And so it's a long-term loan essentially. But the CARES Act allowed in the IDL application that they offer a grant to help the bridge between getting some initial funds in your pocket and the typical 60 to 90-day process it takes for SBA to approve anything. So the CARES Act is funding these little mini grants that you can get in the application process, but it's not like a one and done thing. You're still supposed to go through the whole EIDL application process to get a long-term loan for disaster relief.
Right.
So that kind of hopefully summarizes where it came from and what the purpose of it is.
Got it. Okay. Okay, moving along to the PUA, pandemic unemployment assistance. Just wanted to add, there was a webinar with California EDD this morning, and I couldn't stay on all of it, but one thing that was clear, and I'm going to share a quick screen grab with you that I got from it, was this. This is California. You are advised not to file a UI claim at this time. So again, California is still getting up to speed with this. They weren't ready for this, and as far as I know, Michael, I was talking to you. I know you were on that call. Did they say anything about when they can expect it to be rolling out?
I didn't hear anything on time frame, but they are working on it. The PUA program is designed specifically for people who do not qualify for the traditional unemployment insurance program. So if you've received a 0 award, or you know that you've received no W-2 wages in the year, you should wait and apply for when this program becomes available. They did say all of the information will be posted on the EDD website. And so that is the website that should be checked daily, hourly, for additional information of when this program will be ready for Californians to apply to. And they have said that, it's a complex program that is supposed to rival the size of the regular UI program. So and I think a lot of the confusion came initially as everyone said independent contractors are going to be covered under the CARES Act. And so everyone assumed that it was through the UI program, but each state was responsible for creating a program that would be helpful for people who don't qualify for traditional UI. So some states have come faster to this, like New York. Some have just expanded their existing UI program to independent contractors and self-employed individuals. And it looks like California has decided to create a separate program. And so that is why it's taking California longer to comply with the CARES Act in allowing these people who cannot apply for UI benefits to apply. So again, you can't apply yet. We just have to wait and figure it out. Through the EDD website, there is an eligibility list of who will be eligible for the PUA program. and it's everything in the bucket. So everyone should be able to apply, whether you're a student who just got out of college and you never have had wages, to independent contractors, to sole proprietors. So it's designed to help all of the people who could not benefit from the traditional UI program. And again, to say as well, if at any point there is a hierarchy, so the UI program is first, the existing unemployment insurance program. So if you've received any wages at any point in the last 18 months, you're going to be required to apply through the traditional UI program. And more important than anything right now is that extra $600 is if you have any award of $1 or more, that additional $600 stimulus should be applicable to you, and you should be getting that until the end of July. So you want to work very diligently in getting the UI to get you an award so that you can then get that extra stimulus money.
So yeah, in other words, you're saying, yeah, if you've had a W-2 income, even if it's $1, that you're eligible to receive up to, or no, to receive $600 a week.
The stimulus money.
As part of the CARES Act.
Correct.
Okay, good. Let's see, let me go to some of these questions. Oh, sorry. And then in terms of, because everyone's wondering when when it will be eligible for. So what I have heard is that, like, say you're not going to get, say you can only apply for unemployment and you can't get it for another month or so, but from what I've heard, it's backdated to when you first started being affected by, COVID, right? With your business being affected by COVID. I think I have a slide somewhere that talks about that. Is that?
Yeah, and on that call, they did specify that once the PUA program becomes available, it will be backdated to the point that your business was affected by COVID-19. Mm-hmm. So, and that includes the stimulus money. So some people are receiving the stimulus check already, and some will be backdated and they'll receive a larger sum of that money later. So, and the $600 will be applicable to the PUA program as well. So again, we just have to wait for that program to come out.
Right. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, so we are at 1 o'clock. Let's kind of start wrapping up, hopefully in the next 5 minutes. Is that okay? You guys okay to, you all okay to just answer a few more questions here? For photographers in California, any idea when EDD will be ready? So they didn't say anything about that, correct, on the call?
No.
What are the steps required to qualify for pandemic unemployment assistance? I mean, you're basically going to have to go to the unemployment for your state. And
one thing they did say on that call that I think will be helpful is there's a list of reasons for unemployment insurance, and the reason you want to select is lack of employment due to COVID-19. So there's options like disaster or strike or something else. And in order for your application to be processed faster, you want to select the COVID-19 reasons.
Yeah, they actually said not to check disaster,
yeah.
Right?
Right.
Which I guess, depending who you talk to, this could be considered a disaster that we're in. Okay, Steve, there, have you seen any other relevant questions, Juliet and Steve?
Hey, yeah, Ned, I think most of these have been kind of covered. There's been quite a bit of stream here flowing through. Yeah, I think kind of one question that I had was, you guys had mentioned, so if you are an LLC and a S Corp, or if you're just a sole proprietor, we can still use that Schedule C line 31. That's your payroll essentially, right? I saw a few questions about like, how do we determine that money? Like for me, that's what I would put down. But if I've got someone who's an LLC and an S Corp, they have to be filing quarterly, and they've been paying, because I don't pay payroll taxes for my salary if I'm just a sole proprietor, but I would use that money to put that down as what my payroll is. And I also noticed that it's now a max of 100,000 is what you could have. And so you just basically, if someone has made more than that, they just can only take 100,000, divide that by 12, and that's their payroll. Is that my understanding? And the same would apply for the S Corps and LLCs?
Yes. So essentially, going backwards, about the $100,000 of wage compensation is the cap. So annualize that. And then again, C Corps and S Corps are flow through, right? So as Michael read off in the beginning, unless you're paying payroll taxes, paying wages through payroll, that doesn't qualify.
Okay. Oh, that wouldn't qualify then.
But again, an LLC, right, you would be able to use the schedule and look at line 31 to determine what your net revenue was and use that to apply.
Regardless of whatever category you're in, LLC, S Corp, that's the line 31 is the key number for what your payroll is, right?
But not necessarily. We keep going back to the S Corp. If an S Corp, many S Corps do this where they're not properly processing their wages as payroll. And that's one of the fundamentals of having an S Corp is that you need to pay wages to yourself. Oftentimes people don't do it on a bi-monthly basis, but they do it quarterly because that's when the state wants the money.
Got it.
So
got it. I also saw some confusion about those of us that have an E&I number. Like I have one, but I've essentially, especially if I'm hiring people through a payroll service, right? I'm not really an employer, but is it bad that I have used that to apply for these, even though I'm a sole proprietor or I'm self-employed? Does the E&I number matter, or should we have use our Social Security? How does that work? That was some questions that I saw pop up.
Anyone can apply. You can apply for an EIN, and that's just giving you a record, which is separate from your personal Social Security number. And so your EIN is supposed to be, will be allocated to a particular entity. That entity could be your name, your person as a sole proprietor.
Okay.
But it's a mechanism for taxes primarily, but in order to track you as a entity.
I see.
So again, you can have an EIN and you can apply through your EIN, but then the data relevant to your EIN is what's going to matter.
But if our taxes are attached to that EIN, it doesn't really matter, right? Even we don't have if our taxes have gone under that EIN number, like when we do our taxes, I put my EIN number, even though I don't have employees, except for myself, that shouldn't complicate these applications.
No.
Okay.
And I would just add, going back, because I know there's a lot of confusion on the Schedule C, that sole proprietors and independent contractors fill out a Schedule C. When you file your business as an S Corp or a C Corp, you're traditionally filing an 1120 tax return, which means you're filling out a K-1 and your salaries are listed on that K-1. So you would have separate tax returns and different lines to report your income on your PPP.
I see. And they're going to put the ones for their personal taxes with the salary they've been getting from their S Corp paying out to them, correct? Is that what?
You talk to your accountant about, if you are a S Corp or a C Corp, what do my tax returns say and what should I use that to report in the PPP application?
And something I didn't also see address, it sounds like there's different states are doing different things for this UI, and then this PUA is more specific for California right now. And it sounds like myself, I applied to the UI and put myself down as the employer, and basically they gave me nothing because they said that because I haven't been paying into that system. I don't have employees. And so basically we're just being told to like hang tight until we see the PUA pop up. But those in other states, they can actually have applied and put down, they would have put down their wages lost during this time as an employer, or how do they list themselves for the UI insurance?
Yeah, ultimately what they kind of talked about on that call today is you're going to have to get down to an hourly rate. So if you are a sole proprietor, you are going to have to look at your total annual income, divide the average by 12, divide the average by 52 hours or however many hours in a week, and try to get to that number closest as possible. You have to take your total income and try to fit it into the box of an hourly employee. Hopefully the PUA application makes more sense for independent contractors and sole proprietors, which is the hope, because if you apply through the traditional system, you know, it doesn't, it's like taking a square peg and putting it in a round hole.
Right.
So hopefully it is more helpful in the questions they ask that identify more with, you know, what we do in this environment. So keep our fingers crossed on that. But you have to take your general income and all income that you're expecting to receive via unpaid jobs or anything like that, and report that all as best and accurately as possible in the application.
And those of us that did apply for UI in California, we would essentially have to just reapply. It wouldn't harm us for when the PUA applications come out, from what your understanding is. Okay, the other question is, I saw pop up, is if people have applied for PPP and have not done their 2019 taxes, there's, from our last call last week, the accountant was mentioning that the bank needs to basically verify your income, and they can't do that without our taxes essentially, right? And for the PPPs based off of our last year's payroll, their 2018 taxes are not going to help them in this way. But if you haven't done your taxes, there's really no other way for us to prove our 2019 income. Is that, from your understanding, correct?
I believe the bookkeeper can also put a profit and loss together. Correct me if I'm wrong, Phil. So that's not your actual filed taxes, but it would show all of your financial data from the previous year. But I think, like Nader mentioned, it depends on the bank and whether they're going to accept it or not.
And what I would do is I would gather, as everybody's received all their 1099s from 2019. And so gather all of the data that would be required for your tax return for 2019. Get moving on that, doesn't hurt, and apply for the PPP based upon the data that we have in our hands now and know. And then when it comes to time for the bank to say, let me see the docs, then you can share with them. And again, there's no downside in a lot of this forward motion. So just keep moving forward.
So I'm getting a lot here, seeing a lot of people talking about Wells Fargo. If we can just touch on that. From my understanding, I can't remember what day it was last week. Was it Monday or Tuesday? Wells Fargo said, "Hey, we can't. We're all tapped out." And then maybe it was Wednesday or something that we heard that because they had, I can't remember what it was that they did wrong in 2018, but the government put restrictions on how much of the PPP they can be a part of, and they lifted those restrictions. Do we know about if how much, and if they've started actually accepting applications? And people are wondering what people's experience has been like with Wells Fargo in general. Have you heard anything more about Wells Fargo?
Yeah, my understanding is that because of the situation they had with the sales, it was, a year ago, the government put a cap on the max amount of loans they could put on their balance sheet. So within a couple of days, they had reached that max. So they were working with the government to have that that balance sheet maximum lifted. And once the government allowed them to have that lifted, they would be able to allow additional applications. I haven't heard if that is official or not, or if they have, but my understanding is they were working with the government to have that lifted so that they could apply, they could do more applications.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay.
From what we understand, the government's doing everything they can to try to get this money out as quickly as possible through these banks. My personal experience, we have a relationship with Chase. However, we did not apply through Chase because we also have a working relationship with the Bank of San Francisco. And being that they're a smaller regional, can actually get people on the phone. That was my call to do that. And so I would recommend that people really, look at these companies that are out there that are willing to take on PPP loans to non-existing customers, and see which ones they feel that they could get the most, individualized attention, because there's a long list of people applying, and it's gonna take a long time to get through the pipeline.
Okay, so I think we need to end here, except one last question. Someone's asking, has anyone tried CNA insurance, loss of income? So business insurance. Have you heard of anything about people getting any kind of claims with their business insurance?
I've not heard of any insurance claims paying out.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think, from my understanding, I don't think insurance policies were written for pandemic relief.
Yeah, the only thing I have heard of is French Laundry, Thomas Keller, the restaurant, 3 Michelin star restaurant here, is they're actually suing their company for not allowing them to make a claim. So I'm sure it's happening. I'm sure
Lawsuits are happening.
companies are expecting some kind of claim. And,
no, lawsuits will definitely be had, but
yeah.
I don't think insurance companies are willfully paying claims right now regarding business interruption.
And we're also hearing people should try to get whatever money they can. They can always decide they've gotten approved for a loan and they don't want to accept it. They want to give it back, but there will be a time that it'll stop completely. So better to get in line and get approved.
Right.
And I wanted to add to that, one of the programs that will be available that isn't right now is the unemployment insurance extension program. So I did see a question about having previously exhausted your benefits. And right now that program is not available. It's through, again, the CARES Act, and has to be put into place, and the rules defined in California. But it is a 13-week extension of benefits from the federal government when someone exhausts their regular UI claim in 2020. So again, the website, the EDD website, will be updated once those extensions are available, and you can then apply for that extension. So a heads up on that as well. Okay, well, I think we did a great job, and of course there are tons more questions, and please get in touch, everybody. If your question is really pressing, we'll do our best to be available for you, and also try to compile some of these questions. Not sure what we're going to talk about next week yet, but we'll be back next week. Thank you, Michael and Philip, for joining us. This is really, really nice of you. We know you didn't have to do this, but that you care and you want to support the community. I do want to just put a shout out to, there's APA also has Open Talk, which is on Thursday. I didn't try to do this, but they actually are asking me to be on it, which is going to be interesting. So come join us for that. And also make sure to visit the APA resource page for COVID. Juliet, you're the one that's mostly managing it, right? You're keeping it really up to date.
Yeah, so anything people find, also send it to me, because that's where I'm getting it from the community. We're in touch with a lot of associations. We're all trying to just share information, because that's what the association's about.
And I mean, there are so many webinars happening right now that, I mean, and they're obviously doing a really great job. Like a lot of the other photographer organizations, and you're also posting on that resource page page, right, for all those different
Right.
webinars happening.
Yep.
There's so many that you may not even have, that outside the photo community that are happening, that are just as
Right.
valuable to us.
Everybody's trying to figure it out.
Yeah, Julia, anything else you wanted to add?
No, just
Okay.
thank you to everyone.
Yeah, stay hopeful, folks. I mean, I know this has been tough, and obviously there's a lot of unknowns still, and honestly, who knows what's going to happen? Are we going to get this assistance? I mean, it's still a question, to be honest with you, but I'm trying to stay hopeful and just do the best I can. And like I said, consult with the CPA if you can for this PPP loan, because it is different. And there are lots of different questions. We went over some of them last week. I pulled up a sample application. I mean, let us know if you want to do that again, if that's helpful. But yeah, there's lots of questions on there that you'll go through and think, how, you got all this advice from people and you still don't know how to answer some of them. But again, thanks so much, and we'll be back next week, next Tuesday, same time. Oh, probably 11 a.m. next week.
Yes.
And enjoy your week, and try to relax and have a little bit of fun, and join us on Let's Talk. Thanks, Steve, again for being a part of this, and everybody. We're going to get through this. All right. Take care. Thanks.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.